Hey, thanks for joining me on another Coffee with Waymark. Today, I'm going to give you some good news. Your 2025 tax bill will probably be less than the bill you paid in 2024, which another way of putting this is if you got a refund from the IRS, your refund may be higher. In fact, JP Morgan estimates that the average taxpayer will see refunds about $800 higher than they did in 2024. And a big chunk of that is the result of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is truly the name of the legislation that passed July 4th of 2025. And I'll show you how that all comes to pass. But first, I think what we need to do is actually do a tax 101 on how you actually calculate your taxable income. So let's jump into that. I have this nice little infographic to kind of walk us through what that actually looks like. So when you're factoring or calculating your taxes, you first start with income. No big surprise. So your wages, your self-employment income, your investment income, and then the income that you get from Social Security. Then you subtract any of these above the line deductions, the biggest one being your 401k and IRA and health savings account contributions. But you could also, take up to $3,000 of capital losses in excess of capital gains. If you're a teacher, you can take some educator expenses, so on and so forth. That will give you the most important number on your tax return, which is your adjusted gross income. And why do I say it's the most important? Because it impacts some deductions that you may be able to take or not be able to take, which we'll talk about in a second. Some taxes that you may be subject to or not subject to, and also contribution limits. You may or may not be able to make contributions to traditional and Roth IRAs based on what your adjusted gross income is. So once you get to the adjusted gross income, then there's a fork in the road. And that's where the deductions come into place. And that's where this One Big Beautiful Bill Act actually starts impacting you. Is if you take the standard deduction, then your standard deduction is $15,750 if you're a single taxpayer, or $31,500 if you're married filing jointly. Every taxpayer gets those standard deductions. But where 2025 is different than 2024 is for folks that itemize their deductions. And what I mean by that is that there are now a couple really big deductions that you could potentially be could be available to you based on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. The biggest one is this SALT deduction. So if you're in a high tax state like Massachusetts, Massachusetts has both high property taxes and state income tax. And in our specific case, our state income tax is 5%. So let's use an example. Let's say that you are a $200,000 per year income earner. So your AGI is $200,000. At 5%, that is a $10,000 state and local tax that you pay. So that's one. And then let's say that you have a nice home and you're paying $10,000 in property tax. Well, in 2024, you were capped at $10,000. So you'd only be able to take $10,000 of that $20,000 total. Now the cap has been increased to $40,000 for anyone who has an AGI less than $500,000. So in the same case, the taxpayer who in 2024 could only deduct 10,000 now can take the full 20,000, and at a 25% tax bracket, that extra $10,000 is worth $2,500 of savings. So right there, you've exceeded that $800 estimate that JP Morgan gave to us. So that's one. The other is when it comes to seniors. So anyone over the age of 65, And if they are making less than $150,000 AGI, adjusted gross income, they also get an additional $6,000 or $12,000 of additional deduction, regardless of whether you itemize your deductions or you take the standard deduction. So that's huge. Again, 25% tax bracket, you're married filing jointly, $12,000 of extra deduction. Again, that's another $2,500 to $3,000 of savings just because of the one big beautiful bill. So that's all hopefully good news for you. I'm not going to talk much about the long-term implications of this and the fact that the deficit is, upwards of $2 trillion as a result of some of these tax breaks. But at least from just a tax perspective, that will be a positive thing. If individual taxpayers get $800 extra, in all likelihood, they'll redeploy that $800 back into the economy, which hopefully, and this is one of the reasons why it was put in here, hopefully will stimulate the economy and things will continue to do well for us. So thanks for listening to what I had to say about this. And I hope, as always, you be well and do good.